Hey friends, this is the Meme Team podcast, where we talk about the logic behind virality. Because marketing isn't just logic, it's culture. And our podcast decodes both. All right, we got a couple fun topics here today, don't we?
Yeah, I wanted to start with Sinners being re-released for Halloween weekend. I think it's really cool. They had talked about it coming out in August, but I really like that they're bringing it out around Halloween when like everyone's going to be wanting to watch vampire movies or, dress up like vampires. So it's like very cool to put it around an event. The one thing is like, do people want to go to the movies on Halloween night, or is it just going to be, on other nights around then? But I think it's a great start to start thinking about when we can start re-releasing movies again so that they can be seen at different times by the audiences that love them. And obviously Sinners had a wide reaching audience. People really loved it. It's a good way also to remind people about the movie just in time for like awards season to start.
Oh, that's smart. Yeah, that's
So
true.
I thought that was really smart on their part to, kind of remarket it again and refresh people's minds, because I mean, what we saw last year was that Dune 2, people had basically forgotten about it and forgotten how good it was. So I wonder if they had re-released it closer to when, award season has started, that they would have gotten more nominations, but then also maybe gotten one of the awards.
I wonder, yeah. I guess for Dune, though, I wondered whether they were sort of going for the recognition for when the third one comes out or when the last one comes out, so that the submission is sort of implicitly inclusive of all the movies. But
Yeah, so
yeah.
that's what people are thinking, right? That it's going to be a Lord of the Rings 3 situation, where it's like Lord of the Rings 3 ended up being the one that received all the awards and all the fanfare for director and like the movie and all that. The thing that people are saying is the problem with that is that Dune 3, the book that it's based on, isn't that great. That the book number 2 is like the better one with the better plot. So people are afraid that it's going to lose because people aren't going to like the story as much. And it's also just, trying to bet that, Denis Villeneuve is going to be able to do the same thing and come out with a movie at that caliber when the storyline isn't as great as, 1 and 2. So we'll see. But yeah, something that to think about for movies going forward, where it's like,
Yeah.
do you not just want to award the movie that you want to award instead of waiting to award the entire set of movies? Because like, what if actually at the time, that's going to be when the Odyssey comes out, right? So now it's going to be competing against Christopher Nolan's next movie, which, I don't know. I mean, you might be putting it up against, though I guess actually it did compete against his last movie, right? Because last year
I
was
think so, yeah. Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer. So
Yeah.
we'll see, we'll see.
Yeah.
But anyways, I thought it was pretty cool that Sinners coming out again.
Yeah, I think it's
Kind of
cool.
moved
I
off
think
topic.
it kind of makes me hopeful about a new era of movies, in
Mm-hmm.
that it's going, in a sense, it's going back to what movies used to be, which is this which is collective experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Like when movies first came out, people would get dressed up to go to the movies, and because it was such an event, it was such a novel and unique thing to do. But, over the years, obviously movies have become more pervasive. Everyone knows about them.
Yeah.
And now, like, with the idea that you can just watch your favorite movies at home.
Mm-hmm.
I like this idea of bringing it back to in person, but in a way that it's because people are actually getting something that they cannot get at home.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hopeful for that. And Sinners was a great movie, and totally great for it to come back for Halloween. It also lends itself well to people dressing up if they want to.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure that a lot of couples are going to dress up like one of the two, main couples. Speaking of wanting to experience other things in person, I wanted to bring up how there's going to be a Central Perk coffee shop inspired by Friends that's opening up in Times Square this fall, which I think is a really neat idea because, obviously most people know the show, know Central Perk. The one thing that is maybe a complaint here is that the actual coffee house is not going to look like, Central Perk from the show. It's going to have the orange sofa, that's set up for like taking Instagram and like, for creators and all that. But the rest of the coffee house just looks like Starbucks. Or what I had tweeted about was how it's looking like that new Cracker Barrel that everybody was complaining about, where it just looks like that millennial grayish type coffee house. You'll see here we're putting in the photo, and you see in the corner that like, the orange couch is there. But aside from that, everything just kind of looks like a Starbucks. So I thought that there was a real miss in terms of like how you're actually gonna, have the vibes of the coffee shop itself. It's coming up, like I said, to Times Square, and bringing in Top Chef judge and James Beard Award winner Tom Colicchio, who also has, Kraft and other restaurants in New York. So at least the menu, is going to be pretty good. And they're going to be selling some merch there, like the coffee beans, and then I assume some sort of like Friends merch. But yeah, did you see the coffee house, Amanda?
Yeah, I was just looking up the pictures. I mean, it looks fine, but I don't know. It seems kind of strange to me. Is there an anniversary? Like, why? Like, why are they doing this? I don't think.
I
I
don't
mean,
think it's an anniversary. They're
like, why are
just
they? Like, why?
so yeah. So they have a this is the second one. They launched an original one in Boston in 2023. And I guess that one's doing so well that they're now opening up the New York
Oh,
location.
I
And it
mean, I
like
guess
makes
if
sense in
it.
terms of like, New York and,
Yeah,
the fall weather and all that. Friends, I mean, Friends was, famously took place in New York. But yeah, aside from that, yeah, they're just not really what I would have thought of. It doesn't really resemble the warmth and like, of the original shop, which is like the
yeah,
warmth, charmingness, like that's kind of like what I think of like the set.
yeah,
And so this doesn't really inspire that, but we'll see.
yeah.
Um, and I'm sure that, we'll let y'all know as people kind of take more photos, and if there's like, celebs and, influencers that like make it there, I'm sure we'll come across it on Instagram at some point. And then the last one is that Sabrina Carpenter has been cast in The Muppet Show for Disney Plus special, which I think, kind of plays into, her persona, like what we were talking about a couple weeks ago here, that she's very like playful and like funny, that her humor is such a big part of her, persona and brand, that it really makes sense for me that, she's going to be joining the Muppet Show, which kind of has a similar type of vibe, without any of the sexual context, of course. But also, she was an actress before this. She was part of the Girl Meets World cast for that Disney Plus show when that came out. And so this is kind of like, going back to like her day job when she was an actress.
Yeah.
What do you think? How do you think she'll be?
Oh, it'll be fun.
Yeah, yeah. One of the
I
things
think she'll be
also.
really good in it. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry. One other thing was that somebody brought up that her and Miss Piggy are gonna that they really want to see what the dynamic is gonna be, because Miss Piggy also has a very big like persona,
Yeah.
and also in terms of like being cute, wearing pink, very very big blonde hair, and then also imbuing a lot of humor into her personality. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Really interesting. I'd be curious with I would hope they do something interesting and fresh with that. Because I
Yeah,
think an obvious storyline or an obvious joke would be them competing with each other for attention.
I really hope they don't
But
do that.
yeah, like I really hope they do something like um but they take the opportunity to have Miss Piggy grow or something where it's like,
Hmm.
I mean,
It's
Miss
not
Piggy is
being
getting
jealous.
competitive, but then
Mm-hmm.
like Sabrina Carpenter tries to lift her up, and
Mm-hmm.
it ends up being like, hey, we can support each other. And I would hope, but either
Yeah.
way, I think Sabrina Carpenter she'll be hilarious. It'll be fun to watch, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I hope it doesn't go to that, because it's such a cliche storyline,
Hmm.
women competing, and what if they compete against like compete for Kermit's attention or whatever. I hope they really don't do that. I also don't think it would play well to Sabrina Carpenter's like audience, because a lot of what, she has been doing is like lifting up other, female singers. And then when she did the Dolly Parton duet,
Hmm.
that was like them joining together, joining forces to come out with the song, and they were, kind of playing along together. So I hope they go in that direction where it's like she and Miss Piggy are in cahoots for something. And so they, kind of play up that angle, because I think that would be better for both their images, but definitely for, Sabrina's, who has kind of been building that up in her brand and persona from what I've seen.
Yeah. All right.
So let's talk about somebody else that's also building up her brand. I wanted to bring up how Taylor Swift is dropping both her album and doing a 3-day theater event in October. So from October 3rd to October 5th, she's going to be premiering a movie that's basically premium content for the music video premiere, a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and then an explanation of the songwriting for her album, The Life of a Showgirl. So I wanted to kind of really talk about how we're seeing a lot more artists do event-based scarcity. So that's like, what we've seen with K-pop Demon Hunters, like their release there, the Sinners release that we're seeing here. It's like getting people to come out and like do something in order to participate in a bigger event. I think it's like really smart. I forget when she had come out with like the Eras tour like concert special, but that did really well. She went directly to AMC, worked out a deal to have it released there, bypassing the major studios, and that did really well for her. And so, she's again going to AMC to do this release. One
Mhm.
of the things that I want to highlight as well is that the CEO just tweeted that he's excited for people to dress up, come to the movie and like be in the aisles singing along. So I think it's like he's giving them permission, though I don't think it's like really permission because I think they were going to do it anyway, but
Mhm.
giving them permission to like, come and be all out, be like the fans that they were during the Eras tour. So it's really smart to, say that that's allowed and like really welcome them into the theater. The other thing is she's pricing it at $12, which is a lot less than other movies that are going to be playing at the same time.
Is it
Um,
wait, it's less than the cost of going to a movie?
I think so, right? Aren't like
Oh.
movie theaters like I mean she's setting like this set price. It has to be like twelve
Oh, that's
dollars because
super
it's for
interesting.
the 12th album. So here
Mhm.
she is playing with like numbers
Oh,
again.
yeah.
um yeah, so I think regardless of what the price is for, other
Oh. The reason
um
I didn't know is I go to, like, this little indie theater near me that it's a lot cheaper than most theaters, so I don't
mm.
know how much movie tickets cost.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, AMC is pretty expensive. I think they're
Yeah.
mostly like $20. And then obviously if you want to go to IMAX or, some of the Dolby theaters, those cost more because, they're
Mhm.
premium. But yeah, it's going to cost more. Um so this is also going on top of her, cross-platform synergy where she's, announced the timing. It's at 12/12 for the 12th album. She's doing coordinated social media drops. She did the, podcast reveal strategy with, going on to new heights that we talked about before, then having the engagement news come out. And then she's been slowly releasing more of these things as we're approaching the date. She's kind of bringing everything together and is kind of slow dropping everything. So it's like she's never fully out of the news before like something else is released. And it's giving her fans another opportunity to participate along with her. I really wonder where she's going to be when she's, doing this. I heard she's going to be on the Graham Norton show at some point as well. But yeah, I like wonder what other like media outlets she's going to be going on. If she's just going to go straight to the podcast again,
Mhm.
or if she's going to do some other, drops there.
Yeah. This'll be fun. I mean, definitely a big treat for all fans. I
Hmm.
wonder if they're all gonna wear their orange sweaters, their
Yeah,
Life
yeah,
of a
yeah.
Showgirl sweaters.
Well, I wonder if they're gonna do that. I think there's gonna be a lot more of like the sequins and like the actual, showgirl outfits of,
Yeah.
with like the tights and stuff. Because if you think about it, I feel like that's what a lot of, the women were wearing for the Eras, tour, like the costumes that they wore then. It's a lot of like
Mhm.
what she was wearing on stage, which is a lot of like the sparkly dresses and glitter and stuff. So I think we're gonna see a lot of that. One other thing to call out was that she calls it a soiree. So it's like party where people are gonna come out and like dance and like, be singing and dancing in the aisles and stuff, and knowing that that's going to be the experience that everybody is going to be experiencing when they're there, I think is a good way to kind of label it, where it's like it's not just going to be like you're just going to be sitting there, next to people. It's like no, you're going to be like actively participating and being part of the release. One thing to kind of compare it to was when Beyonce dropped her Renaissance movie. So I think this is a new approach to dropping new music that Taylor is taking to kind of differentiate herself and try something new from like what Beyonce's doing. Who not to pit them against each other, but it's like
Mhm.
obviously they're taking cues from each other of like, oh, what's the latest way that we're releasing new music and getting direct to our fans. When Beyonce famously, just dropped her album on a Friday night and everybody was just like listening to Lemonade, and then when she did the Coachella performance and released that movie out, it's like Taylor, she's upping the game. So I like that they're all kind of taking these new ways of upping their game and like really trying to get in front of their fans and like have that direct experience with them, as opposed to just releasing it the old way. So yeah, we'll see. I think it's obviously gonna be successful. According to Deadline, they've already sold 15 million in the first day pre-sales, and they think it's gonna be around 30 million to 15 million for the box office overall, which is pretty good for a film. Any independent film. So the fact that it's that high for Taylor Swift makes a lot of sense. So, good for her. And, this could be another channel for her going forward if she, wants to for, each of the albums. Or like I said, maybe this is the one time that she does it to like try it out and then, figure out like what to do as the new thing for the next album. Because think about it, her favorite number is 13. Her 13th album is probably going to be like crazy, the marketing rollout and like campaigns around it. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
So lessons to be learned here is basically creating that artificial scarcity, right? She's giving her fans 3 days to go to the movies. It's to see the show, see the music video, and kind of see the behind the scenes, the songwriting and the music video overall. Eventually, I assume it'll come out on some of the other platforms. I think her Eras tour came out on Hulu, and then the Miss Americana was on Disney Plus. So eventually, I assume it'll come out on streaming as well. But this gives her fans the ability to participate in an IRL experience. So that's really cool of her to like do that, giving her community a chance to come together once again to celebrate with other, Taylor Swift fans, which was such a huge part of why a lot of the fans enjoyed the Eras tour. It was just like getting to meet and, dance around and sing with other fans that, hold her to the level that they do. So you're just like building that community with other like-minded people. And then, speaking to like what we've been talking about here is that, theaters aren't dead. They're just kind of evolving content. So if they're able to, start doing this with more artists and bringing in that, content that like you release something with bands and allow like, their fans to come, that allows movie theaters to create a different type of event that's not just movies. I mean, sorry. It is a movie. It's just a different type of movie. But it gives theaters new things that they can be bringing forward. So I'm excited to see kind of what evolves from this, and gives theaters a fighting chance to continue growing and get people to come out and participate in more IRL experiences instead of just kind of sitting at home and listening to an album by yourself.
Yeah. All right. So last week, Cluely's CEO, Roy Lee, wrote a post about virality. He initially presented it as like Cluely's viral strategy, but it wasn't really about that. Like the post overall was about virality in general as a strategy. I thought it was a really interesting post. It's not very long, about just that notion of, do you need to go viral? How important is it for you? It's a good post for any CEO to read who has been the CEO who's been like, oh, let's just make it go viral. Because the overall point of his post is that virality is often misunderstood. And there's a right way to go viral. And I think he's also speaking in the world of Silicon Valley, right? Like there are different ways to look at virality, and I think everybody has a different definition of it. So it's not virality of like it's bad to get 10,000 likes or 20,000 likes. It's not even about that. It's sort of he sort of defines what it is in a
Mm.
sense. And so one
So what
thing
you're
he
saying is that most marketers, you would suggest send this to their CEO whenever they ask them to go viral.
Yeah, pretty much, right? Because he defines, like, what that really means and
Yeah.
whether something, like, should it go viral? Because
Mhm.
one thing he says pretty early on is, like, first you need to deserve virality. Like, it's at least on X and in the world of tech Twitter, it's most posts that deserve to go viral will.
Mhm.
And yeah, it is dependent on at least a few thousand people seeing it. And that's true, right, for with anything. But ultimately in this audience, if something isn't actually that good or that interesting or that clever, or, whatever it is, it's not going to go viral. So
Mhm.
that's one thing. And I think for anybody who feels that pressure of, oh, do we have to make this thing go viral? It's you have to ask yourself, well, why should it? Right?
Mhm.
Because what it boils down to is it's the content that deserves to get amplified that does get amplified. That's one thing. And the other thing is you need to understand what you want from virality. Right? It's not just, hey, let's go viral and then hopefully you'll get more customers. It's, well, there are a couple of types of virality that you might want to achieve, right? Because, like, one thing is, sure, it can help you acquire some new customers, but if there isn't good, like, product market fit, then it's not ultimately going to help your business, right? And in that case, it isn't virality that you should be chasing. Virality should multiply the existing traction, right? You shouldn't be reliant on it to create the traction for you.
It's really interesting. That reminds me of the whole idea of just paid ads, right?
Mhm.
Where it's like so many people think it's like, oh, I just have to put money behind, this and it'll bring me leads without thinking about, are you actually putting money behind the type of people that you want to bring in? You know, and so a lot of people waste a lot of money and a lot of time just throwing money into like paying ads without asking the question of, um, is this the type of ad that would bring in the type of consumer that we want to bring in?
Right.
And of the consumers that are coming in, is this actually the type of consumer we want? And a lot of the times the answer is no, but like people just kind of keep doing it because they've been doing it or they feel like they have to. And a lot of startups feel like they have to just put money behind ads without asking those two questions, and they end up wasting a lot of money. And eventually they're like, okay, well, maybe we're approaching this wrong. Is it that we're approaching it where the customer is wrong, or is the product that we're marketing to the consumer that we want wrong? And I think those two questions are super important to figure out before you start spending money on ads, because it's going to matter so much more for the leads that you're bringing in and eventually in how you're making your business grow.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think there are similar heuristics here. Like,
Hmm.
because it boils down to, like, does it deserve it? Well, what do you mean deserve? Like, is it
Hmm.
actually a good offer? Is it what
Yeah.
people want? Does it align with the kind of type of customer
Hmm.
you want? Does it align with the type of purchase behavior that your business needs in order to grow? Right? Those
Hmm.
are all things that we should be asking ourselves as marketers,
Hmm.
as business owners, like as we think about creating the campaigns that actually do ladder up to those business goals.
Yeah. One thing I want to call out here is that Roy mentions that, right? Where he's like, we've gone viral so many times, and so many of so much of the content that went viral didn't actually bring us any leads. Which is mind-boggling to like I assume a lot of people, because they're just like, what do you mean? How could you go viral and then like not actually translate that into any leads? And it's like, this is the main crux of what he's talking about, right? It's just you can go viral, you can get all this attention, but if you're not getting attention from the right people that actually would want to buy your product, then what's the point of going viral other than just getting the attention? Also, to call out here for him and what they've been doing at Cluely is that he's then kind of translated this into more viral attention to himself and like what they're actually building. And that's led to, getting Andreessen Horowitz to like invest in them, and getting other investors. It's also helped, I'm sure, in recruiting engineers and marketing folks, the creators that they've brought onto the team. So leads might not be the main goal of why you go viral. There's other things that you can also be using that virality to get you. That's not just, oh, we're converting leads and like converting to sales and all that. So that's another thing to think about here. It's like the goal of like what you're doing doesn't always have to be leads. It can be, all these other things
Right.
that help your business grow.
Right, exactly. It's think about what your business needs.
Hmm.
Like, Is it that you are going to make some key hires?
Mhm.
Is it that you're going out for a new round of funding, right? That
Mhm.
isn't just customers. And similar to that, on that notion of virality not equaling customers, we run into this a lot at SparkToro, the startup that I work at, where we have we've been in the news a handful of times over the years. Sometimes, for some really exciting things. Like I think it was last year, we were mentioned on John Oliver's show
Hmm.
in a study about zero click search. I think they were citing our study on zero click search and how 2/3 of Google searches end without a click, and they were citing some of that stuff, and that was super exciting for us, right? Because they called us, they asked some questions about the research to make sure it held water, and
Mhm.
they asked if they could mention us, all that good stuff, and that was super exciting. Of course, we were thrilled to be part of it, but does it translate to new customers? It didn't. It's like on one hand, of course we wanted the mention,
Mhm.
right? But on the other hand, it's, well, we're marketers mainly from agencies and consultants
Yeah.
watching this show looking for a new MarTech tool to buy. No, they weren't. So, yeah, good example of you can get these top tier placements, but if they don't ultimately align with your audience and what you're selling, then it's, as far as a business growth driver,
Mhm.
right? It might not be addressing what you're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, also, I doubt John Oliver's show talked about what SparkToro is or does in the way
Right.
that it would require somebody to be able to make the decision to purchase
Right.
y'all.
Yeah, they were making the broader point about Google, and
Exactly.
they were like, "By the way, this company SparkToro," and they showed our
Yeah.
logo, the
Yeah,
great, but
yeah, yeah.
anyone watching that would be like, "I don't know, I guess that they're a research analytics firm."
Yeah, exactly. But then, it wouldn't take that next step.
Yeah.
But that's another thing where it's like, what do you do with that, right? Or it's like, then you have the opportunity to talk about that experience and like, use that to then promote yourself a little bit. Hey, like this opportunity happened to us, so that calls attention to you. I mean, we've had a couple of examples here where we've talked about that, right? Where it's like not necessarily the campaign itself, but it's the talking about it that ends up getting more publicity. Like we talked about the Canva billboards that people were talking about online about. We talked about the Oura billboards, and then like the whole idea there is like, how do you turn this specific type of campaign into like the marketing case study that brings you more attention because people recognize that it's unique and like different than like what's happening with other companies, but that requires you as a company to be able to talk about it and put it in that context and not just rely on that you showed up on the John Oliver show, or that
Yeah.
you went viral x amount
Some big takeaways here are, if you're the CEO listening to this show,
of
it's next time you ask your team to just make it go viral, think about what that actually means for your business, not just as this thing that marketing is responsible to make happen. It's, what are the business goals that you have right now? Is it hiring? Is it acquiring new customers? Is it retaining customers? What is it specifically? And then think about, and truly like sit with this and think about it. How does virality improve that mechanism for you, if it does at all? So
yeah.
that'll be my challenge to people
Yeah.
listening to this here.
That segues perfectly into Claude's new ad, which also just went viral. And I don't think the whole point of it was to bring in new leads. I think for me, it was more of a brand awareness type video where it's like
Mhm.
contrasting itself between all the other, AI services out there, ChatGPT, Perplexity. And so Anthropic's Claude really wanted to separate itself and is putting more of an artistic and existential narrative behind the human AI partnership by putting the problems, you see this in like the beginning of the ad and then to like the solutions, right? And it's just kind of positioning itself as being more of a thinking partner for humans as they, are searching for answers that, as compared to Perplexity. I'm comparing it here to the Perplexity ad that they launched a couple months ago, where they had Li Zhengzhe from Squid Game. And that one also went, viral. And they were kind of approaching it from like a different angle where it's like a more entertainment driven and having that, celebrity power. So it's like really interesting to kind of contrast, those two, because they're, direct competitors a little bit more so than ChatGPT because they're, almost at the same level, whereas like ChatGPT is so far outside of that, that it's like now you're kind of giving people the optionality of like, well, what's the type of AI that you want to like work with? Is it one that's like, warm and like thoughtful and like works with you? Or is it one that's like, a little bit more like playful and like you'll remember that they were mocking Poogle. And they also had like different production choices, right? Like the Anthropic has more like retro aesthetics and a little bit more like emotional storytelling, which you're seeing a lot more in a lot of like the startup like product launch ads that we're seeing recently. Whereas Perplexity had, it was a more high budget production. And had that, celebrity endorsement there. And you've also seen that like they're going more celebrity, right? Like if you watch Formula One, you know that Lewis Hamilton has the Perplexity logo on his helmet, when he's racing every week. He's also done a couple of tweets where he said like, question like, hey, ask Perplexity, and he asked like a question. I think the last one was like, who scored the most, laps on this like race, and it was like he was the answer. So I thought that was like, funny, but it is interesting that they're kind of going up against each other, and going about it in a different way. And I think that that's like a way that like, companies that are placing themselves up against competitors, what they can do to think about like the type of consumer that they want to bring in, what their brand, what their value is, what the mission is, and then, do an ad around that or a campaign around that, in order to make it clear like the type of, consumer that you want to bring in. And I think that that makes it more likely for your audience to find you and then want to use, you instead of the variety of the other competitors that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was trying to watch the video.
The
I,
Perplexity
I
one?
the Claude one.
Mm.
And honestly, I don't know. I think it's just not for me because I couldn't get through it. I was just like, this is so boring. Like they're saying the same thing over and over again. And I was
Hmm.
like, is this how long is this? Like 10 minutes? It's like I think it's like 90 seconds. I was like, I can't watch it. So I think maybe it's not for me, and that's
Hmm.
okay.
Hmm.
I
Did
think
you
it's
watch the Perplexity one?
no, I didn't see that one either.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I'll
Hmm.
just say that. Like, I think it's interesting that they are running these full campaigns. I don't know where the Claude one is going to air. I mean, it's clearly I know it's an out of home ad,
Hmm.
so it's going to have a bunch of spots. It'll be on like Netflix and Hulu. They're doing some print stuff with the New York Times and Wall Street Journal. So we're doing a lot of stuff. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it does. I mean, I think with the way people are feeling about AI, and
Hmm.
when I say people, I mean people in general,
Mm.
I think it's an opportunity for these companies to try to position themselves where it makes sense for you to use our technology.
I mean, the way I see it, it's like you clearly have this, giant that you're competing against, right? OpenAI's ChatGPT, like they own so much of, the market that it's just really hard for any of these other ones to stand out. So you got to do something, right? You got to like, is it maybe the type of consumer that we're going after? Is it like the use case, Like it's really hard when it's like they're all maybe basically the same, right? They're trying to be a better Google, but is that really the most compelling case for why you want to use an AI? Probably not for most people, We are seeing like more examples of like one example that just like came across my feed was this guy just had like a health scare that ChatGPT helped essentially saved his life because he went to the hospital to the ER when he otherwise wouldn't have. And he later went on to Google to check like if he had entered in the same information that he had entered into ChatGPT, what would come up. And like none of the correct information of like what guided him to actually make it to the ER came up. So that's like something to think about, where it's like Google is failing at like, giving us the most, relevant information. And we've all kind of known that, right? SEO, keywords, all that is kind of like failing. We all know that. We've seen it happen, right? Like a lot of us in marketing, like we've had to change our entire like marketing strategy in order to kind of start working with that, right? And we've talked about that here, right? Where it's like, a new way is like the goal is to try to get into like the AI summaries, right? Um, and so with knowing that, you know, people now are going to start moving over to some sort of AI to like help them for like search. ChatGPT is the obvious one because that's the biggest one. But if, people don't want to, whether they don't like OpenAI, whether, they find something, right? They don't want to be using a specific, type of AI or whatever. Maybe one of these other ones, will help them, right? And I remember there being a time when like Perplexity was the better search algorithm, and then it went back to like, ChatGPT. So there are fluctuations of which AI is the better, AI. Um, so maybe there's an opportunity there for people to, switch. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, what do they do, right? Just give up, like do nothing. I think that that's, the interesting thing here, where it's like they're going like for brand and like the type of, user, the use case, and then using that to maybe try to bring in like new consumers. But we'll see, right? Because maybe they're just throwing a whole bunch of money at like paid ads and then not getting any leads from it?
No, they'll probably get leads from
Yeah.
it.
No, never true, but like enough leads, right?
Mhm.
That's like, where we're at. So we'll see. I'm curious, I've used Perplexity a lot. I like this new like Claude ad where it's like kind of speaking more to the humans that don't want to feel icky about using AI, though I mean you're still using it if you're using it. But that's yeah, something to think about there. But we'll see. Anyway, the takeaways for me there are yeah, really honing in on the type of user that you're going after and the use case, right? There comes a time where it's like you start seeing the same types of like users if you're, building a brand around that. And usually, that's based on like the founder and like their strategy and what they were trying to build in the first place and like their main goal or insight, and then kind of expanding the target consumer from there. And then, building your brand around that and trying to like, reach your target consumer in a way that gets them to use your product. So I see that that's kind of like what they're doing here. We'll see. Wish them the best of luck, right? And then, when you're competing so directly against, other people that are doing essentially the same thing, like really trying to position yourself in a unique way will have, your target consumer find you in order to, use your product versus, all the others.
All right, our last topic is Aura. So I saw this morning that Aura raised a Series E round. So they raised $875 million at a $11 billion valuation. They've sold over 5 million rings, and they expect over $1 billion in revenue this year. I just thought this was interesting because of just where we're at with wearable tech these days. My instincts were, are people even still buying wearable devices? I mean, they are, right?
The Apple
But
Watch, right?
the Apple Watch, right? But I think what's
Actually, the one that's
interesting,
coming in that I think is a wearable that we don't really count as one is the AirPods.
uh,
A lot of people use them.
the IDC expects, which is kind of, one of those research firms, is case they're often cited by the wearable industry themselves when they talk about their news. But the IDC expects growth in wearable tech to slow this year to about 4%. Just because the idea that a lot of these categories are hitting maturity or saturation. But it's also hard to compare Aura with like Apple Watch and Fitbit, for instance, because Aura it's a wearable ring. It's not a watch. When these industry firms are reporting on market share and things like that, they're not really pitting Aura against Apple Watch, right? It's Aura versus other smart rings. I can't even name another
Interesting. I'm like,
smart
what other
ring
smart
brand.
rings are there?
I don't even know, right? But they do have like 80% of that market share. So that's
Interesting.
interesting. That's like
Yeah.
they technically don't, at least on a research and analytics watchdog point
Mhm.
of view, they don't compete with the Fitbits and the Apple Watches and the Garmins. They're just smart rings. But I don't know. I think I'm also bringing this up because what I think is interesting is, like I was saying, are people still buying wearable tech? Do people
Hmm.
still need this? It's kind of interesting that they haven't gone public yet. It's like, why do you keep raising rounds of funding? Like now it's Series E, and
Yeah.
how are you at an $11 billion valuation? Like that's kind of wild to me, to be honest. I think
Mhm.
especially because, and I say this as a former Aura user, I had two generations of rings. I used it for several years. And the thing that was the most frustrating for me was the complete lack of insights or health insights for women. It was only 2 years ago that they finally launched period tracking, which I think is absurd
Yeah,
that they
that's
had
wild.
this device out for 7 years. Like 7 years, they were fully detecting when people were about to get sick. They were detecting like based on body like basal temperature, like
Mhm.
if you were going to get a fever, if you were starting to feel under the weather, they would know, right? Like a day in advance if whether or not you would get sick, but they still couldn't track periods until just until fall of 2023. Like that's really funny to me. That kind of made me realize as I was thinking about wearable tech is how not that useful it is. I think for most women in a way that's like if you as a woman are looking for insights specific to you,
Mhm.
like whether it is because of your menstrual cycle
Yeah.
or something else, like it's all kind of just like the same. Hope for these things to actually innovate and like give people the information that they wouldn't otherwise have. But so far, it's all just kind of like heart rate, which is useful when you're working out. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is useful to know that, but
That's interesting because it's not even just period tracking, right? It's like, what about like fertility tracking? I mean, you mentioned the basal, temperature, and that's a huge thing of like how you can recognize whether you're ovulating or whether you're, not. What seems to have happened is now there's just a bunch of small products that do one functionality, which is you have the period tracker, and then you have the fertility tracker, and then you have the menopause tracker, and then, so it's like women's, health and like tracking seems to have like all these products that you're supposed to use that don't interact together or like work with each other. And the main ones that you would want to have that, the Apple Watch and Apple Watch does have period tracking, but you kind of have to like log that in yourself. It's not actually, doing it with you. Don't actually have these basic baseline, health things that women, most women face, right? Which is kind of dumb. And yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like, what's the point if you're not going to give me this huge facet of like data that is actually relevant to me and like my health, you know?
yeah. So like I stopped using like all this wearable tech. Like
Hmm.
I just have an app on my phone now to track some interval training workouts. So like that's just time.
Hmm.
So that is just that. And as far as period tracking goes, I downloaded the Stardust app because
Mm.
like a friend was like, "Oh, this is really funny. Like you'll get it'll help you track your period." So I thought I would try it for a while. And it is kind of funny to check in with it and see what it says and to see in general, like what are some common symptoms based on where I'm at in my cycle. So that's
Hmm.
kind of interesting. What it boils down to is I just track my period in my Google Calendar.
Yeah.
Like that's just where I put it. Like I log
Yeah.
it when I get it so that I can figure out when the next one is coming
Hmm.
or so that I have a sense of it. I just have it as like a recurring monthly thing.
Hmm.
And so in any given week, if I see it on my calendar, like, oh, period's starting this week, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll probably get it like later this week. Like, that is still more useful to me than any of these apps. So, I
Imagine
think
that, just a calendar invite.
what is it? There was, like, a funny tweet from a long time ago that was,
Yeah.
like, most B2B companies are competing with someone's spreadsheet.
Hmm.
For
Oh
me,
yeah.
all these period tracking apps are competing with my Google Calendar.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So,
That's
I think my
funny.
overall takeaway for this is, you know what, if you are in the health tech space or, maybe even just more broadly than that, like, just I don't know. I mean, you can build whatever you want, right? But
But you're missing on a huge audience. Hello. Women are the ones that have like money to spend and actively spend on these types of products. Lifestyle products are like a huge thing for women. So the fact that they don't do that. But this also reminds me of the Whoop, bracelet. There was an article that like went viral and then they promoted it as a case study and everything, which I thought was like hilarious, of how one woman who like she was like some sort of like competitive athlete and she got pregnant and continued using the Whoop through the pregnancy. But all of a sudden, all the readings were off because now her heart rate is higher. Her blood, like all the things that happened during pregnancy were now, showing her that her body was like wrong, and it's like because it's not adjusted to being pregnant, which is crazy. And then she wanted to log the whole process of like childbirth. And obviously the Whoop doesn't have that option to count the, the heart rate and all that for a workout. Right. So she created her own like custom one, to do that, to kind of like log how much physical effort went into childbirth. And, she talks about like the case study and everything. And I thought like, this is wild. It's like, I do wonder if since then they have changed anything, or just continue to use it as a case study that's on their, testimonials page or whatever.
That's sort of funny. I feel like on one hand, that's really impressive, right? I mean, it is very impressive, but I think what's funny about that is that only highlights to me all of these devices' shortcomings.
Right?
And I get it. Like, and I understand though that like people aren't typically giving birth every year, so it's not common in that regard. Like it's not a frequent activity for most people.
But enough women do it every year that there should be at least a program that you could opt into when it happens to you, right?
Right.
I think for me it was one of those things where it's like showing like, oh, like a new creative way that someone used our product.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, baseline thing that a lot of women go through every year. That like should be part of the experience because it's such a huge thing, right? And not even just the childbirth, but like going through pregnancy itself. If there was a way for you to keep track of like how, whether you're, baseline okay, like that could help a lot of women and inform the decisions that they're making and like, what they're doing on a daily basis. Like that could be very useful. And the fact that they don't like is a huge miss, for me.
Yeah. Big takeaway for me is make products that solve people's problems.
Yeah.
Make things that people need, and then they'll buy them from you.
Yeah.
Thank you, friends, for joining us for another episode of Meme Team. If you like this episode, please take a moment to leave us a review and a rating that helps out indie podcasts like ours. You can subscribe to our list and stuff over at memeteampodcast.com. You can follow us at Meme Team Pod on YouTube.
Okay, bye, everyone.
Bye, friends.